The river roared like a living beast, swollen with 3 days of rain, and Marcus Everett knew the wagon train had tried to cross 2 late splinters of wood and scattered belongings churned in the muddy torrent. And somewhere in that chaos, he heard a sound that might have been a scream or might have been the wind tearing through the canyon walls. He urged his horse closer to the bank, squinting through the spray when he saw her. A figure caught against the rocks, green skin stark against the brown water, her body limp and rolling with each surge. Without thinking, Marcus threw himself from the saddle and plunged into the shallows, the cold stealing his breath as the current tried to drag him under. His boots scraped against submerged stones, his arms windmilling for balance, and then his hands closed around fabric, a torn shirt, rough woven, and beneath it the solid weight of a body. He hauled with everything he had, muscles screaming, until they both tumbled onto the muddy shore in a tangle of limbs. She was not breathing. Marcus rolled her onto her side, water pouring from her mouth, her nose, and he struck her back hard between the shoulder blades, the way his father had taught him years ago when a neighbor's child had fallen into the mill pond. Once, twice, 3 times, and then she convulsed, retching up river water in violent spasms. Her eyes snapped open yellow gold, bright as coins, wild with panic, and her hand shot out to grab his shirt with desperate strength. Her fingers twisted in the fabric, pulling him close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in those inhuman eyes, the small tusks jutting from her lower jaw, the pointed ears pressed flat against her skull. "Easy," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "You are safe. You are out of the water." She stared at him, chest heaving, her grip on his shirt unrelenting. Her gaze darted past him to the river, then back to his face, searching for something he could not name. Recognition, maybe. Threat assessment. He had seen orcs before, of course, usually at a distance when raiding parties came down from the mountains, or when trade caravans passed through with orc guides who kept to themselves and avoided eye contact with the human settlers. He had never been this close to one, close enough to see the way her skin was not simply green but shaded with deeper emerald along her arms, fading to something softer at her throat. Close enough to see the fear in her eyes, raw and immediate. "I am not going to hurt you," Marcus said, though he wondered if she even understood him. Some orcs spoke the common tongue, others did not. "You were drowning. I pulled you out." Her fingers loosened fractionally, but she did not let go. She coughed again, her whole body shaking with the effort, and Marcus became aware of other details. The cuts on her arms, the purple bruise spreading across her temple, the way her clothes hung in tatters. She wore the remnants of leather armor over a simple tunic, the kind scouts or outriders might wear, and there was a knife sheath at her belt but no knife. Blood mixed with the water dripping from her hair. "Are you injured?" he asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. "Can you speak?" "Human," she rasped, and the word was thick with accent shaped awkwardly by tusks and a different palate. "Why? Why did I pull you out?" Marcus sat back on his heels, releasing his own grip on her arm, showing empty hands. "Because you were dying. Does there need to be another reason?" She studied him with those unsettling yellow eyes, and then her gaze flicked past him again, scanning the riverbank, the line of trees beyond. Looking for enemies, he realized. Looking for whoever had hurt her. The wagon train had been human. He was almost certain the goods scattered in the water had that look, barrels and crates of the type settlers brought west into the frontier. Had she been with them, a prisoner? A guide who had been betrayed, the others, she said, struggling to sit upright. Marcus moved to help her and she flinched, but allowed it, perhaps because she was too weak to refuse. "Where? I do not know. I saw the wreckage a quarter-mile upstream. I have not seen anyone else." He paused, weighing his next words. Were you traveling with humans? Was guard. She coughed again, softer this time. Hired. Then bridge broke and she stopped, her jaw clenching. Pushed into water, took payment back. Anger flared in Marcus's chest, hot and immediate. He had heard stories like this before. Humans hiring orc muscle for the dangerous parts of the journey, and then finding excuses to avoid payment, or worse. But to push someone into a flooding river, to leave them to drown, that was murder, plain and simple. He looked at this woman, this stranger with green skin and tusks, and saw only someone who had been wronged. Bastards, he said, and her eyes widened slightly at the venom in his voice. Can you stand? My homestead is an hour's ride from here. You need warmth and food, and those cuts need tending. Why? She asked again, and this time the question carried more weight, more confusion, as if kindness from a human was incomprehensible. Because it is the right thing to do, Marcus said simply. He stood and offered his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then at his face, then slowly reached up and clasped his forearm in the way warriors did. Her grip was weak, trembling, but there was strength beneath the exhaustion. He pulled her to her feet and she swayed, and he caught her waist to steady her. I am Marcus, he said. Marcus Everett. What is your name? She hesitated, as if even that small piece of information was dangerous to give. Grasha. Grasha, he repeated, making sure he pronounced it correctly. Can you ride? My horse will carry us both if you hold on. Can ride, she said, though her legs were shaking. Pride, Marcus thought. She did not want to appear weak even now. He retrieved his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, who had the good sense not to spook at the sight and smell of an orc, and helped Grasha mount first before swinging up behind her. She sat rigid in front of him, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity, but when he clicked his tongue and Copper started moving, she slumped back against his chest, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. The ride back took longer than an hour because Marcus kept the pace easy, unwilling to jostle her more than necessary. The sun was past its zenith by the time his homestead came into view. A sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn, a chicken coop, and fields that stretched toward the tree line. It was not much, but it was his, carved out of the wilderness with his own hands over the past 3 years. He had come west after the war, after watching too many friends die in muddy trenches over borders that kept shifting, and he had wanted nothing more than a place where he could work the land and be left alone. Grasha stirred as they approached, her head lifting. Here, home, Marcus confirmed. He dismounted first and reached up to help her down. This time she did not flinch, though her movements were stiff, painful. He could see her better now in the full light. She was tall, nearly his own height, with broad shoulders and corded muscle visible beneath her ruined clothes. Her face was striking in a way he had not expected, strong-featured with high cheekbones and a wide mouth. The tusks that curved up from her lower jaw were small, barely longer than his thumb, and filed to smooth points. Her hair was black, thick, and had been braided at some point but was now a tangled mess plastered to her skull. He led her inside, into the single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with a sleeping loft above and a smaller bedroom off to one side. The fire in the hearth had burned down to coals, and he quickly built it up again while Grasha stood dripping on his floor, looking around with wary curiosity. She was shivering now, deep tremors that shook her whole frame. You need to get out of those wet clothes, Marcus said, already moving to his bedroom to find something that might fit. He returned with one of his own shirts, a pair of trousers that would be too short on her but better than nothing, and a wool blanket. Change into these. I will turn around. She took the clothes with numb fingers, and he heard the rustle of fabric. the soft grunt of pain as she moved. When he turned back, she was wrapped in the blanket, her wet clothes in a sodden pile at her feet, and he was struck by how vulnerable she looked despite her size. He gestured to the chair nearest the fire, and she sank into it gratefully. "I am going to check your injuries," he said, fetching the wooden box where he kept his medical supplies, bandages, needle and thread, a bottle of whiskey for disinfecting. "Tell me if anything hurts." "Everything hurts," she said, but there was a hint of dry humor in her voice that surprised him. He allowed himself a small smile. Fair enough. He knelt beside the chair and carefully examined the cut on her temple first. It was not deep but would need cleaning. He dampened a cloth with whiskey and she hissed when he pressed it to the wound, her hand shooting out to grip the arm of the chair. "Sorry," he murmured. "This is going to sting." "Is fine," she gritted out. "Had worse." He cleaned the cut thoroughly, then moved to her arms. Most of the injuries were superficial, scrapes and bruises from being thrown around in the river, but there was a deeper gash on her left forearm that made him frown. "This one needs stitches." Grasha looked at the wound with clinical detachment. "Do it." Marcus threaded the needle, heated it briefly in the fire, and began to work. She did not make a sound as he sewed, though he could see her jaw clenched tight, the muscles jumping beneath her green skin. He kept his hands steady, his movements efficient, the way the field medics had taught him during the war. When he tied off the last stitch, he bandaged the arm carefully and sat back on his heels. "Done. You should rest now." "Why are you helping me?" She asked the question bluntly, those yellow eyes fixed on his face. "You are human, I am orc. Your people kill mine. My people kill yours. This is how it is." Marcus stood and moved to the kitchen area, needing something to do with his hands. He pulled out bread, cheese, and the remains of yesterday's stew, setting them to warm over the fire. "That is how it has been," he said slowly. "But it does not have to be how it always is. I have done enough killing. I came out here to get away from all that. You were soldier." "Yes." 5 years. He did not elaborate and she did not press. He ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table, along with the bread and cheese. "Eat. You need strength." She joined him at the table, moving slowly, and for several minutes they ate in silence. Marcus watched her from the corner of his eye, noting how she tore into the food with barely restrained hunger, how her hands shook as she brought the spoon to her mouth. When had she last eaten? Before the crossing. Before she was betrayed. "Where will you go?" he asked eventually. "Do you have clan nearby?" Her expression shuddered. "No clan, left 2 seasons ago." "Why?" "Because I want a different life." She said it flatly, but he heard the pain beneath. "Clan did not agree, so I left and became a guard for hire." "Yes, was good work, mostly." She gestured with her spoon, a bitter twist to her mouth. "Until today." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood, perhaps more than she realized. He too had left behind everything he knew, everyone who had expectations of who and what he should be. Out here on the frontier, people reinvented themselves or tried to, but the past had a way of following, of coloring every interaction. "You can stay here while you heal," he said. "I have extra space in the barn, or why?" She cut him off, and there was frustration in her voice now, maybe even anger. "Why do you keep helping? What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Marcus said and meant it. "I want nothing from you. I am offering help because you need it. That is all." She stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the trap. He let her look, keeping his expression open, honest. Finally, she slumped back in her chair, exhaustion winning out over suspicion. "Do not trust easy," she muttered. "Trusting gets you hurt." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "But sometimes not trusting gets you killed. You need time to recover. Stay a few days, a week, however long it takes. And then if you want to leave, you can leave." Grasha was silent for a long moment, her gaze dropping to the table. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Thank you." That night, Marcus gave her his bed and took the loft himself, despite her protests. She was asleep within minutes, her body finally surrendering to the need for rest, and Marcus lay awake listening to the sound of her breathing, the pop and crack of the settling fire. He wondered what he had gotten himself into, offering shelter to an orc in a region where most humans would shoot first and ask questions later. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her grabbing his shirt, those yellow eyes wide with fear and confusion and something like hope, and he knew he had made the only choice he could live with. The next morning dawned clear and cold, frost glittering on the grass outside. Marcus woke early out of habit and climbed down from the loft as quietly as he could, but Grasha was already awake, sitting at the table with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked better. He thought less pale or less gray, or whatever the equivalent was for green skin. The bruise on her temple had darkened to deep purple, but the swelling had gone down. "Morning," he said. "How do you feel?" "Sore, stiff." She flexed her bandaged arm experimentally. "But better." "Good." He moved to the kitchen, stoking the fire and setting water to boil. "I am going to check the fields today, make sure the rain did not cause any flooding. You should rest. I can help. You are injured. I can still work." There was pride in her voice again, that stubborn set to her jaw. I cannot just sit and do nothing. Please." Marcus considered her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you start feeling worse, you tell me. Deal, deal." They ate a quick breakfast of porridge and set out into the cool morning. Marcus showed her the fields, the irrigation channels he had dug, the places where the ground tended to hold water. She walked beside him, limping slightly but keeping pace, and asked questions that showed she knew something about farming. He learned that her clan had been semi-nomadic, following herds, but they had kept small plots of vegetables and grains during the seasons when they settled. "You have good land," she said, surveying the neatly plowed rows. "Rich soil. You could grow more if you expanded to the east field." "I know," Marcus said, "but that is more work than one person can handle at harvest time. I grow what I can manage." She nodded, understanding. They worked through the morning, Marcus showing her the damage from the rain, a washed-out section of channel, some saplings knocked over at the edge of the tree line. She helped where she could, fetching tools, holding things steady while he worked. They did not talk much, but the silence was comfortable, the silence of people accustomed to labor. Around midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of the barn, sharing water from the pump. Grasha rolled her shoulders, working out the stiffness, and Marcus found himself watching the play of muscle beneath her skin, the casual strength of her movements. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow, and he felt heat creep up his neck. "Sorry," he said quickly. I have never really been around orcs before, not like this. What do you think?" There was challenge in her voice, but also genuine curiosity. "Am I what you expected?" "I did not know what to expect," Marcus admitted. "Growing up, I heard stories that orcs were monsters, savages, that they killed for pleasure and ate human flesh." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But those were just stories, told to scare children. You are just a person, same as me." "Not same," Grasha said, gesturing to her green skin, her tusks. "Obviously different. Different appearance," Marcus agreed. "But same in the ways that matter. You feel pain, fear, hope. You work hard, you have pride. Those are not orc traits or human traits. Those are just life traits." She was quiet for a moment, then dipped her head in acknowledgement. "You are strange human, Marcus Everett. I will take that as a compliment." "It is," she said, and there was warmth in her voice, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her wide mouth. They fell into a routine over the next several days. Marcus would rise with the sun, make breakfast, and then they would work together on whatever needed doing, repairing the chicken coop, mending fences, harvesting the last of the late-season vegetables. Grasha proved to be a tireless worker, and her strength, even diminished by injury, was greater than his. She could lift logs he would have had to lever into place, could dig post holes twice as fast as he could. But she also took direction well, listened when he explained how he wanted things done, and offered suggestions born of her own experience. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Marcus learned that she was 23, which was young for an orc warrior, but old enough to have made a name for herself in her clan. She had left not because of any crime or dishonor, but because she had wanted to see more of the world than the same mountain valleys her people had roamed for generations. Her clan had called her foolish, had said she was turning her back on her blood, but she had gone anyway. "You regret it?" Marcus asked one night, watching the firelight play across her face. "Sometimes," she admitted, "especially when humans look at me like I am a monster, or when they cheat me or try to hurt me. But then I remember what life was like in clan. Same thing every day. Hunt, move, hunt, move. Elders telling everyone what to do, who to mate with, what to think. I wanted more than that." "I understand," Marcus said. "That is why I came west, to have something that was mine, built by my own hands, to not have anyone telling me when to fight, when to kill. The war." She asked, and he nodded. 5 years of marching, of watching friends die over land that meant nothing to us. When it ended, I took my mustering out pay and came out here. I have not regretted it. Not even when it is lonely. The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, at the way the firelight softened her sharp features, and realized that, yes, it had been lonely. Desperately so some nights when the silence pressed in and there was no voice but his own. But he had thought that was the price of peace, of freedom. "Yes," he said honestly. "Sometimes it is very lonely, but I thought that was better than the alternative." "Maybe there is other alternative," Grasha said quietly. "Not soldier, not alone, something between." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, and their eyes met and held, and something passed between them that neither was quite ready to name. A week after he had pulled her from the river, Marcus went into the small frontier town of Ashford to trade eggs and vegetables for supplies. He took Grasha with him despite her reluctance, arguing that she needed proper clothes and boots, and that he could not afford to outfit her entirely from his own limited wardrobe. She agreed finally, but insisted on wearing a hooded cloak that covered most of her face. Ashford was barely more than a crossroads with delusions of grandeur. A general store, a blacksmith, a tavern, and a scattering of houses. The storekeeper, a grizzled man named Tobias, raised his eyebrows when he saw Grasha but had the sense not to comment. Marcus bought cloth, thread, leather for boots, and a few other necessities, paying with the credit he had built up over months of trade. As they were leaving, a group of men emerged from the tavern, obviously already deep into their cups despite the early hour. One of them, a large man with a red face and mean eyes, spotted Grasha, and his expression curdled into something ugly. "Well, well," he said loudly. "What do we have here? Marcus Everett keeping company with greenskins now." Marcus felt Grasha tense beside him, her hand moving instinctively to where her knife should have been. He put a hand on her arm, gentle but firm, and faced the drunk. "My business is my own, Garrett," he said evenly, "and I suggest you get back to your drinking. Your business." Garrett took a step forward, his friends fanning out behind him. "When you bring an orc into our town, it becomes everyone's business. We do not want her kind here. She is with me, and we are leaving." Marcus kept his voice calm, but his body was ready to move if needed. He had fought enough tavern brawls during the war to know how this could escalate. There is no trouble here unless you make it. Already trouble, bringing a monster among decent folk. Garrett spat to the side, a deliberate insult. Bet she is real grateful for your charity, Everett. Bet she is keeping you warm at night, huh? That why you are protecting her? The words were designed to wound, to provoke, and Marcus felt anger flare hot in his chest. But before he could respond, Grasha spoke. I am standing here, she said, her voice low and hard. You want to insult someone, you look at them. You do not have courage for that. Garrett's face went redder and he took another step forward. Oh, it talks. And here I thought orcs were too stupid for language. Enough. Marcus moved between them, his hand dropping to the knife at his own belt. We are leaving. Do not follow us. For a tense moment, the situation hung on a knife's edge. Then Tobias appeared in the doorway of his store, a shotgun cradled in his arms. Problem out here? The storekeeper asked mildly. Garrett glanced at the shotgun, at Marcus, at Grasha, and finally stepped back with a sneer. No problem. Just wondering why good men have to share their town with orc filth. Last I checked, this was a free territory, Tobias said, and Marcus's money is as good as yours. Better, since he pays his tab. Now move along before I decide you are disturbing the peace. Garrett and his friends retreated, though not without backward glances full of hate. Marcus nodded his thanks to Tobias and led Grasha away, back toward where Copper was tied. Neither of them spoke until they were well outside of town. I am sorry, Marcus said finally. I should have expected that, not your fault. But her voice was tight, controlled. This is why I wear the hood, why I stay away from towns. They are idiots and drunks. They are humans, Grasha said flatly. And they see orc, and that is all I am to them. Monster filth, not person. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. You are a person to me, you are Grasha, that is all you need to be. She looked at him, and he saw the walls she had built around herself, the armor of indifference she wore to protect against casual cruelty. Why? She asked, and it was the same question she had asked in his cabin in the river over and over. Why kindness? Why help? Why care? Because everyone deserves to be seen, Marcus said simply. Really seen for who they are. And I see you, Grasha. I see someone strong, someone brave, someone who works hard and makes me laugh when you mock my cooking. I see someone I am glad to know. Her eyes widened, and for a moment her carefully controlled expression cracked, showing something raw and vulnerable beneath. Then she looked away, cleared her throat roughly. Your cooking is terrible, she said, but her voice was unsteady. Vegetables always too soft. I know, Marcus said, allowing her the deflection, the retreat back to safer ground. Maybe you could teach me how you like them. Maybe, she said, and when she looked at him again there was something new in her yellow eyes, something cautiously hopeful. That evening, Grasha began making herself a proper set of clothes from the material Marcus had bought. She worked with surprising dexterity, her strong fingers guiding needle and thread with practiced ease. Marcus watched from across the room, ostensibly repairing a harness but mostly just admiring the concentration on her face, the way her tongue stuck out slightly between her tusks when she focused. Where did you learn to sew? He asked. Clan, she said without looking up. All warriors learn. Have to be able to repair gear in field. Warriors. So you were a warrior, not just a guard. Was blooded at 16, she said, a note of pride entering her voice. Led scouting parties at 19, was good warrior, fast, strong, good instincts. She paused, her hands stilling. But could not make self fit what clan wanted. Could not stop asking questions. Why we fight these humans but trade with those. Why some traditions good but others we cannot question. Elders did not like questions. Questioning authority is dangerous, Marcus said. I learned that in the army. Soldiers who think are soldiers who might not obey. Yes, Exactly. She resumed sewing, her stitches quick and even. So I left. Better to be alone than to pretend to be something I am not. You are not alone now, Marcus said, and then immediately wished he could take the words back because they sounded presumptuous, too familiar. But Grasha looked up at him and her expression was soft. No, she agreed quietly. Not alone now. The days continued to pass, and autumn deepened into the kind of crisp, golden weather that made the frontier beautiful. The leaves turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the work of preparing for winter became more urgent. Marcus and Grasha worked side by side, cutting and splitting firewood, smoking meat, preserving vegetables. They fell into sync, anticipating each other's movements, communicating with gestures and glances as much as words. One afternoon, while they were clearing deadfall at the edge of the property, a deer broke from the underbrush and fled. Grasha moved with startling speed, her hand snatching up a fallen branch and hurling it in one fluid motion. The branch caught the deer in the legs, sending it tumbling, and before Marcus could even process what had happened, Grasha had pounced, her knife, a new one Marcus had bought in town, flashing once across the animal's throat. It was over in seconds, clean and efficient, and she straightened with blood on her hands and a look of satisfaction on her face. "Dinner," she announced. Marcus laughed, surprised and impressed. "That was incredible. I did not even see you draw the knife." "Was what I was trained for," she said, but she looked pleased by the compliment. They dressed the deer together, Grasha showing him tricks for field dressing that were new to him, more efficient than the methods he had learned. That night they feasted on fresh venison, the best meal they had shared, and afterward sat outside watching the stars emerge. "You know," Marcus said, stretching his legs out, "I think this is the best I have felt since I came west, maybe the best I have felt in years. Because of deer." Grasha asked, teasing. "Because of company," he corrected. "It is strange how quickly you can get used to having someone around, to not being alone." She was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the sky. "I feel same," she admitted. "Was not sure I would ever," she stopped, started again. "Did not think human could see me as anything but enemy, but you do not look at me that way." "How do I look at you?" The question came out before he could stop it, and he held his breath, half afraid of her answer. Grasha turned to face him, and in the moonlight her skin seemed to glow faintly, luminous. "Like I am person," she said softly, "like I matter." "You do," Marcus said, his heart pounding. "You do matter. To me." The space between them felt charged, electric. Marcus wondered if he should move closer, if he should reach out, but he was paralyzed by uncertainty. This was not like anything he had experienced before. He had been with women, of course, had felt attraction and desire, but this was different. This was Grasha, who was orc and warrior and refugee, who had trusted him despite every reason not to, who looked at him now with those luminous yellow eyes and made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. She stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "I should sleep. Tomorrow we finish wood pile." "Yes," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow." But as she walked toward the cabin, she paused and looked back. "Marcus, thank you for everything." "Always," he said, and meant it with his entire heart. The turning point came on a gray morning 2 weeks after he had pulled her from the river. Marcus woke to the sound of horses and voices outside, and his soldier's instincts kicked in immediately. He was down from the loft and at the window in seconds, peering through the gap in the shutters. 3 riders, armed, wearing the kind of mismatched gear that marked them as sellswords or bounty hunters. His stomach dropped. Grasha appeared from the bedroom, already awake, her knife in hand. "Who? Do not know, but they look like trouble." He turned to her, mind racing. "Is anyone looking for you, from your clan or no? Clan would not bother. but her face had gone carefully blank, and he knew she was thinking the same thing he was. Someone from the wagon train come to finish what they had started. A fist hammered on the door. "Open up. We know you are in there." Marcus exchanged a glance with Grasha, then moved to the door, positioning himself to block the view inside. He opened it a crack. "Can I help you?" The speaker was a hard-faced woman with a scar running from her temple to her jaw. "We are looking for an orc female, probably injured. Saw your smoke, thought we would ask if you had seen anything." "I have not seen any orcs," Marcus said evenly. "Sorry. Mind if we look around, just to be sure?" She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I do mind, actually. This is my property and you are not welcome on it." The woman's smile vanished. "Listen, friend, we do not want trouble, but that orc killed 3 men and stole a considerable sum of money. There is a bounty on her head. Now, you seem like a reasonable man, so I will ask again. Have you seen an orc around here?" "I told you no." Marcus kept his voice level, but his hand drifted toward his own knife. "And I am going to have to ask you to leave." One of the other riders, a young man with nervous eyes, spoke up. "He is lying. Look at him, he is sweating. The greenskin is in there." "We are not leaving without searching your cabin," the woman said, her hand dropping to the pistol at her belt. "Now you can step aside peacefully, or we can do this the hard way." "This is the hard way," Marcus said, and then Grasha was there, stepping into view behind him, her knife ready. "You want me," she said flatly. "Then come get me, but leave him out of it." The woman's eyes lit up with triumph and greed. "There you are, boys, we have got ourselves a payday." "She did not kill anyone," Marcus said sharply, "and she did not steal anything. You are the ones who tried to murder her." "We," the woman laughed. "I do not know what she has been telling you, friend, but we were not part of any wagon train. We are just honest bounty hunters following a trail. Now step aside." Marcus realized with sickening clarity that these were not the people from the wagon train. They were opportunists, drawn by rumor or by tracks, hunting Grasha for whatever reward someone had posted. Which meant the people who had actually tried to kill her might still be out there, and also meant that Grasha's presence here had been noticed, reported. "No," he said simply. "No." The woman's hand tightened on her pistol. "You are willing to die for an orc." "I am willing to defend my home," Marcus said. "This is my land and she is my guest. You are trespassing. Leave now while you still can." The standoff stretched, tense and brittle. Marcus was acutely aware of how badly this could go. 3 of them, 2 of him and Grasha, and they had at least 1 pistol to his knife. But he also saw the uncertainty in the younger man's eyes, the way the 3rd rider, who had not spoken, was edging his horse backward. They had expected an easy capture, not resistance. "This is not over," the woman said finally. "We will be back, and when we come, we will bring the law." "You do that," Marcus said. "I would be happy to explain to any lawman how you tried to force your way into my home." They left, but slowly, making a show of confidence they did not quite feel. Marcus did not move from the doorway until they were out of sight, and then he sagged, the adrenaline draining out of him all at once. "That was stupid," Grasha said behind him, but her voice was shaking. "You should have let them take me. They would have killed you." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, turning to face her. "But I was not going to let them take you. I meant what I said. You are under my protection." "Why?" And this time the question was almost a plea, desperate for an answer that made sense. "Why would you risk your life? I am nothing to you, just orc you pulled from river." "You are not nothing," Marcus said fiercely. He crossed the distance between them and took her by the shoulders, making her look at him. "You are Grasha. You are brave and strong, and you make me laugh. You work harder than any person I have ever met. You cook better than I do, even though you mock me for it. You are my friend, and I will be damned if I let some mercenary scum take you for a bounty that is probably a lie anyway." She stared at him, breathing hard, and he realized how close they were, how warm her skin was beneath his hands even through the shirt. Her yellow eyes were wide, vulnerable in a way he had never seen. She stopped, swallowed. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Marcus said, but his hands did not drop from her shoulders. I do, though. Her voice was barely a whisper. Because I feel I have been feeling, she made a frustrated noise. Words are hard, but when you look at me, I feel seen, feel real. And I think about what it would be like to stay. Not just until I heal, but longer. Maybe always. And I do not know if that is stupid, if I am stupid for wanting. Not stupid, Marcus interrupted. Not stupid at all, because I have been thinking the same thing. He took a breath, steadied himself. Grasha, I know this is we are from different peoples. I know what others would say, what they would think. But I do not care. These past weeks with you have been the best I have had. And if you want to stay, if you want to build something here with me, then I want that too. More than I have wanted anything. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for insincerity, and finding none. Then, slowly, carefully, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. It was an orc gesture, he realized, a gesture of trust, of intimacy. He closed his eyes and breathed her in, the smell of leather and wood smoke and something uniquely her. I stay, she whispered. I want to stay. They stood like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead, and Marcus felt something in his chest unlock, some tension he had been carrying for years finally releasing. When they separated, Grasha was smiling, a small, hesitant smile that made his heart clench. So, she said. We have made bounty hunters angry. What now? Now we prepare, Marcus said. If they come back, and they probably will, we need to be ready. I have a rifle in the barn and ammunition. We can fortify the cabin, make it harder for them to approach unseen. You really meant it, Grasha said wonderingly. About defending me. I really meant it, Marcus confirmed. We are in this together now. They spent the rest of that day and the next preparing. Marcus retrieved his old service rifle from where he had stored it in the barn, oiled and loaded it, and set it beside the door. They boarded up one of the windows, leaving just enough gap to see and shoot through, and stocked the cabin with extra water and food in case of a siege. Grasha fashioned herself a makeshift spear from a long branch and one of Marcus's spare knives, and practiced throwing it until she could hit a target at 30 paces. On the third day, riders appeared again, but this time there were more of them, the original 3 plus 4 others, and at their head was a man wearing a tarnished badge that might have once signified real authority. A frontier marshal, or someone claiming to be one. Marcus stepped out to meet them, Grasha at his side. State your business. The man with the badge, a grizzled veteran with cold eyes, gestured to Grasha. That orc is wanted for murder and theft. I am here to bring her in. On whose authority? Marcus asked. And whose complaint? Authority of the territorial government. Complaint filed by the Weston Trading Company regarding an incident 3 weeks ago involving the murder of 3 employees and the theft of $200 in gold. Marcus felt Grasha stiffen beside him, but he kept his focus on the marshal. The Weston Trading Company hired her as a guard, then pushed her into a river to avoid paying her wage. The only theft here was theirs, and the only attempted murder was theirs. She has committed no crime. That is not what the complaint says. The complaint is a lie, Grasha said, her voice hard. They broke contract. They pushed me into water while I was hurt, would have drowned if Marcus had not pulled me out. You have proof of this contract? The marshal asked. It was verbal. Then it is your word against theirs. And I am afraid theirs carries more weight. He sighed, and Marcus got the sense that he was not entirely happy about this situation. Look, I do not know what happened out there. Maybe you are telling the truth, but I have a legal complaint and a warrant. I have to bring her in. She can tell her side to a judge. And you think she will get a fair hearing? Marcus demanded. An orc, accused by a human company. We both know how that trial will end. That is not my problem, the marshal said, though his tone suggested he knew Marcus was right. I am just doing my job. Now, you can let her come peacefully, or I can arrest you both for obstruction. Marcus felt the situation spiraling out of his control. He looked at Grasha, saw the resignation on her face, the way her shoulders had slumped. She was preparing to surrender, to go quietly to whatever fate awaited her, because she did not want him to suffer for her sake. No, he said. The marshal frowned. Excuse me. I said no. Marcus straightened, his hand moving to the rifle slung across his back. This is my land. I know my rights. You cannot just march in here and take someone without due process. If you have a warrant, then it needs to be reviewed by a local magistrate. And the nearest magistrate is in Millerton, 3 days' ride from here. We do not have time for that. Then I guess you have a problem. Marcus's voice was hard, unyielding. Because I am not letting you take her without proper process, and if you try to force the issue, you will have to go through me. The marshal studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the cabin, at the boarded windows, the defensible position. He was clearly doing the math. Was this worth a fight? Was it worth potentially dying over? You are making a mistake, he said finally. Protecting an orc, you will make yourself an outcast. No one will trade with you. No one will help you. You will be alone out here. I would rather be alone than complicit in injustice, Marcus said. The marshal shook his head, but there was something like respect in his eyes. 3 days. I will file for a magistrate review. If you do not bring her to Millerton for a hearing in 3 days, I will come back with more men, and I will take her by force. Understand? Understood. The riders left, and Marcus watched until they were out of sight before allowing himself to exhale. Grasha was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read, awe maybe, or fear, or something else entirely. You are insane, she said. You just made enemy of law. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but I bought us 3 days. 3 days to figure out what to do. What can we do? We cannot run. Cannot hide, and I will not let you fight law for me. We can fight with truth, Marcus said. He was thinking fast now, piecing together a plan. Weston Trading Company filed a complaint. But if we can find evidence that they broke contract, that they attempted murder, then we can counter their claim. We need witnesses. We need proof. There were others in wagon train, Grasha said slowly. Other guards, drovers, maybe they saw. Exactly. If we can find them, get them to testify, why would they? They did not help me before. Because maybe they were scared before. Or maybe they did not realize there would be legal consequences. But if we can find even one person willing to tell the truth, it might be enough. Marcus gripped her shoulders again, making her meet his eyes. We have 3 days. Let's use them. They rode out that afternoon, heading toward Ashford first to see if anyone had news of the wagon train's whereabouts. Tobias, the storekeeper, was sympathetic but unhelpful. He had heard nothing. But the blacksmith, a quiet man named Samuel, mentioned that a group matching the description had passed through 2 days prior, heading north toward the mining camps. Marcus and Grasha pushed hard, riding through the day and into the evening, stopping only to rest the horses. They reached the first mining camp after nightfall, a sprawling mess of tents and rough-built shacks where men with hollow eyes dug for silver that would likely make someone else rich. Marcus asked questions, described the wagon train, and finally, in a tavern that smelled of sweat and desperation, found a man who had been there. His name was Cole, and he was a drover, young and guilt-ridden. When he saw Grasha, his face went pale. "You are alive," he whispered. "No thanks to your bosses," Marcus said. We need you to tell us what happened. The truth." Cole looked around nervously, but the tavern was loud and no one was paying attention. "They hired her as a guard," he said quietly. "She did her job, kept us safe from bandits twice. But the company man he did not want to pay said it was too much for an orc. They argued and then the bridge broke while we were crossing. She fell in and the company man he pushed her with a pole, made sure she went under, told us all she had just slipped, that it was an accident." "Would you testify to that?" Marcus pressed. Cole hesitated. "They will fire me, maybe worse." "They are going to hang her," Marcus said bluntly. "For a crime she did not commit. Is your job worth a woman's life?" Cole looked at Grasha, really looked at her, and Marcus saw the moment the young man made his decision. "No," he said. "No, it is not. I will testify." They rode through the night to reach Millerton before the 3 days were up, Cole with them, and arrived dust-covered and exhausted to find the marshal already waiting with his men. But Marcus also found the magistrate, a stern woman named Alina Cross who had a reputation for fairness, and presented Cole's testimony before any arrest could be made. The hearing was tense, held in a courthouse that was really just the largest building in town. The Weston Trading Company sent a representative, a slick man in an expensive suit who argued eloquently that Grasha was a dangerous savage, that Cole was a liar or a dupe, that the company had done nothing wrong. But Cole stuck to his story, and Marcus spoke passionately about what he had witnessed, the condition Grasha had been in when he found her, the injuries consistent with an assault, the bounty hunters who had come looking for her. Magistrate Cross listened to it all, her face impassive, and then delivered her ruling. "The complaint filed by Weston Trading Company is dismissed due to lack of credible evidence. Furthermore, I am issuing a warrant for the arrest of the company's foreman on charges of attempted murder and theft of wages." Case closed. The courtroom erupted in noise, but Marcus heard none of it. He turned to Grasha, who was staring at the magistrate as if she could not believe what she had just heard, and he grinned. "It is over," he said. "You are free." She looked at him, and then, in front of everyone, she pulled him into a fierce embrace that lifted him off his feet. There were gasps, mutters of disapproval, but Marcus did not care. He wrapped his arms around her and held on tight, feeling her shake with silent sobs of relief. They rode back to the homestead in high spirits, Cole having parted ways with them to seek new employment far from Weston Trading Company. The autumn sun was warm on their backs, and the world seemed brighter, full of possibility. When they reached the cabin, Marcus dismounted and turned to help Grasha down, and she slid into his arms with easy familiarity. "So," he said, not letting go. "You are staying." "I am staying," she confirmed, and then, before he could say anything else, she kissed him. It was clumsy at first, their mouths not quite fitting together, her tusks bumping his lip, but they adjusted, learned, and then it was perfect. It was sweet and fierce and tasted like hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers again. "I love you," he said, the words spilling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it is fast, I know it is strange, but I love you, Grasha. I think I have since the moment you grabbed my shirt and looked at me like I was your entire world." "Love you too," she said, her accent thick with emotion. "Love you, Marcus Everett, my human, my savior, my home." They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, and Marcus knew that this moment, this woman, this impossible, wonderful love was what he had been searching for all along. Not peace, not solitude, but connection. Belonging. Someone to see him, truly see him the way he saw her. The winter that followed was hard, as winters on the frontier always were, but they faced it together. Marcus taught Grasha to read and write, spending evenings by the fire with a slate and chalk, watching her fierce concentration as she mastered letters and words. She taught him to hunt in the orc way, moving silent through the forest, reading signs he had never noticed before. They expanded the cabin, adding a second room and a proper loft, and talked about what they would plant in the spring. Word of their relationship spread, of course. Some neighbors stopped visiting, stopped trading. But others, like Tobias and Samuel, accepted it with the pragmatism of frontier folk who had learned that survival mattered more than prejudice. And slowly, gradually, Marcus and Grasha built a life that was entirely theirs. In the spring, Marcus proposed. He did it simply, without a ring or formal words, just the two of them sitting on the porch watching the sun rise over the fields they had planted together. "Marry me," he said. "I know it would not be legal in most places. I know there would be no official ceremony. But marry me anyway. Let us make vows to each other, binding ourselves together in whatever way matters." Grasha turned to him, her yellow eyes bright in the dawn light. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." They spoke their vows under an oak tree at the edge of the property, with only the wind and the birds as witnesses. Marcus promised to honor her, to protect her, to see her always for who she truly was. Grasha promised to stand beside him, to share his burdens, to love him with all the fierce loyalty of her warrior's heart. And when they kissed to seal their promises, Marcus knew that he had found something rarer and more valuable than any gold in the earth. A partner, an equal, a love that transcended the boundaries others tried to impose. Over the years that followed, other orc-human couples began to appear in the territory, drawn by the story of Marcus and Grasha, by the proof that such love was possible. Their homestead became a waypoint, a place where those fleeing prejudice could find shelter and acceptance. Marcus and Grasha welcomed them all, shared what they had, and slowly, piece by piece, helped build a community where green skin and pale could live side by side. There were still hard days, still people who hated them for what they represented. But there were also days of joy, the first successful harvest from the expanded fields. The night Grasha taught a group of human children an orc song, and they sang it back with delighted laughter. The morning Marcus woke to find her standing in the doorway, her hand resting on her stomach, tears on her face as she whispered that they were going to have a child. Their daughter was born in the autumn, during the same golden season when Marcus had pulled Grasha from the river. She had her mother's green skin and her father's dark hair, and when she opened her eyes, they were a startling mixture of gold and brown, something entirely new. They named her River, after the place where their story had begun, and she became the symbol of everything they had fought for. A future where children would not have to choose between their heritage and their hearts, where love could be simply love, uncomplicated by fear or hate. Marcus held his daughter in his arms and looked at Grasha, who was exhausted and radiant, and felt such overwhelming gratitude that he could barely speak. She reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together, green and pale, strong and calloused, perfectly matched. "We did it," she said softly. "We made family, made home." "We did," Marcus agreed, "and I would do it all again. Every hard moment, every fight, all of it to get here." "Same," Grasha said, squeezing his hand. "Always same." They raised River in that cabin on the frontier, teaching her both human and orc traditions, making sure she knew the stories of both her peoples. She grew up strong and curious, helping in the fields, learning to track game with her mother and to read and write with her father. The community around them grew as well, other families settling nearby, and slowly the fear and prejudice that had once been absolute began to soften, worn down by familiarity, and the simple evidence that orcs and humans could live, work, and love together without the world ending. Marcus and Grasha grew old together, their hands weathered by work, their bodies marked by time and labor. But when Marcus looked at Grasha, he still saw the woman who had grabbed his shirt, who had looked at him with desperate hope in her yellow eyes. And when Grasha looked at Marcus, she still saw the man who had risked everything to pull her from the water, who had chosen her over safety and acceptance. On their 20th anniversary of that first meeting, they returned to the river. It was quieter now, tamed by a bridge that Marcus had helped build with other settlers, but still powerful, still wild in its own way. They stood on the bank, holding hands, and Marcus thought about everything that had flowed from that single moment of decision to save her, to help her, to love her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here with me instead of finding your clan or going somewhere else?" Grasha looked at him, and her smile was warm, certain, full of the love they had built together over 2 decades. "Never," she said. "You are my clan. You and River and all the family we have made. This is exactly where I am meant to be." "Good," Marcus said, pulling her close. "Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You are everything, Grasha, my whole world." "And you are mine," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "My savior, my love, my Marcus." They stood there as the sun set, casting the water in shades of gold and orange, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice that day on the riverbank. Not just for him, but for all the lives they had touched, all the people who had found hope in their story. Love, he had learned, was not always easy. It required courage, sacrifice, the willingness to stand against the world if necessary. But it was worth it. Always it was worth it. The river flowed on, carrying with it the memory of that day when everything changed, when a human man pulled an orc woman from the wreckage, and she opened her eyes and grabbed his shirt and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. And in that grip, in that desperate connection between 2 strangers from different worlds, something new had been born. A love that would shape the future, a family that would bridge divides, and a story that would be told for generations to come. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the sky, Marcus and Grasha turned back toward home, toward the warm lights of the cabin where their daughter waited, toward the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination. Behind them, the river whispered its approval, its eternal song a reminder that even the strongest currents could be survived, that even the deepest waters could be crossed, if you had someone to hold on to. And Marcus and Grasha, walking hand in hand through the twilight, knew that they would never let go.